For more than 3,000 years, one name has echoed across the pages of myth and memory. Achilles. A warrior so fierce, so unstoppable, that ancient storytellers claimed he was almost a god, a man who could not be killed except by one impassable, fated weakness. He was the ultimate hero, the star of Homer's Iliad, the face of the Trojan War. But today, as archaeologists dig deeper into this and historians re-examine ancient texts, a new and startling question has emerged. Was Achilles even a myth at all? Or was he a real soldier, a flesh and blood man lost in the fog of history? This question changes everything. It forces us to reconsider the line between story and fact, between legend and reality. Because if a figure as mythic as Achilles could have been a real person, what other heroes might be waiting for us, buried beneath centuries of sand and forgotten stories? To uncover the truth, we must journey back in time. TNRF bronze, kings, and collapsing empires. We're heading to around 1200 BC, the tail end of the Bronze Age. This is the world that gave birth to the legend of the Trojan War, a conflict that defined ancient Greece and shaped Western civilization. For centuries, the war itself was considered pure fiction, a grand tale spun by the poet Homer. But then, everything changed. The biggest challenge for historians has always been Homer. The Iliad, our primary source for the story of Achilles and the Trojan War, was composed around 750 BC. That's nearly 500 years after the events it describes. Imagine trying to write a detailed history of the year 1524 based only on campfire stories passed down through 20 generations. Details would get blurred, facts would become legends, and men would become gods. This is why, for so long, scholars dismissed the Iliad as brilliant poetry, but terrible history. They believed Homer simply invented the characters and the setting. But here's the twist that reshaped modern archaeology and put Achilles back on the table. As researchers began to excavate sites from the late Bronze Age, they started finding things that shouldn't they have been said if Homer was just making it all up. They found descriptions of armor, weapons, and the battlefield tactics in the Iliad that were completely unknown in Homer's own time. For example, Homer describes warriors using massive tower shields that covered a man from neck to ankle. By the 18th century BC, when Homer lived, soldiers used smaller, round shields. But archaeologists digging in Bronze Age tombs found evidence of those exact tower shields. Homer also described helmets made from rows of boar tusks. Again, these were completely out of fashion in his day, yet archaeologists unearthed perfectly preserved boar tusk helmets from Mycenaean warrior graves dating to 1200 BC. It was a stunning revelation. Homer wasn't just inventing details, he was preserving cultural memories from half a millennium earlier. It was like finding a medieval manuscript that accurately described a smartphone. The details were too specific, too anachronistic to be a coincidence. This meant that the oral traditions Homer drew upon contained genuine fragments of the Bronze Age world. So, if the armor was real, and the weapons were real, a new question became unavoidable: could the warriors themselves have been real too? Did Homer preserve the memory of a real champion, a man we now know as Achilles? To find the answer, we have to travel to modern-day Turkey, to a dusty hill known as Hisarlik. In the 1870s, a controversial and obsessive amateur archaeologist named Heinrich Schliemann arrived here, convinced this was the location of the legendary city of Troy. He dug recklessly, driven by his belief in Homer's story. What he found stunned the world. Beneath this, Schliemann discovered not one city, but 9, stacked on top of each other like layers of a cake, each one built on the ruins of the last. And in one of those layers, now designated Trophigia, archaeologists found something chilling. They found a city that had been violently destroyed around 1200 BC, the very time the Trojan War was said to have taken place. The walls were scorched by a massive fire. Skeletons were found lying in the streets where they fell. And everywhere, war brands, arrowheads and sling stones, clear evidence of a brutal siege and a desperate, final battle. This didn't prove Achilles existed, of course, but for the first time, it proved that the setting for his story was real. The war wasn't just a myth. A real, historical conflict had occurred at Troy. The stage was set. Now, the search could begin for the leading man. With the Trojan War established as a historical event, the spotlight turned to the other side of the Aegean Sea, the mainland Greece and the civilization known as the Mycenaeans. These were the people Homer called the Achaeans, the ones who sailed to Troy. And when we look at the world of the Mycenaean warrior kings, the figure of Achilles starts to look less like a myth and more like a job description. The Mycenaeans were the dominant power in the Aegean from about 1600 to 1100 BC. They were builders, traders, and above all, they were warriors. Their society was a feudal system built for war, ruled by powerful warlords from fortified citadel palaces like Mycenae and Pylos. The elite fighters of this world were terrifying. They were tall, brutal, and trained for combat from childhood. Their graves are filled with bronze swords, spears, and daggers. As we saw, they wore the boar tusk helmets and carried the tower shields described by Homer. These weren't just soldiers, they were a warrior aristocracy, a class of men whose entire existence revolved around honor, glory, and deadly combat. They were the perfect candidates to produce a champion like Achilles. And then there's the name itself. In the Hittite archives at Ifal Empire in Anatolia there are references to a powerful and troublesome kingdom to the west they called Ahiawa. For decades, scholars have debated this, but men now believe Ahiawa is the Hittite name for the Mycenaean kingdom, the land of the Achaeans. From the word for their people, Akaiwoi, it's a very short linguistic jump to a personal name like Achilles. Achilles. The name itself seems to be rooted in the very identity of the Mycenaean people. But the most tantalizing clue, the piece of evidence that feels like it comes straight out of the Iliad, comes from the Mycenaeans themselves. It comes from their own written records, inscribed on clay tablets in a script we now call near-invincibility. For years, these tablets were unreadable. But when they were finally deciphered in the 1950s, they gave us a direct window into the administration of the Mycenaean palaces. Much of it is boring accounting, lists of wine jars, wool shipments, and the chariot wheels. But some tablets list something else. They list rations and the equipment given to specific individuals. Among these lists, we find records of warriors receiving special treatment. They're given extra rations of grain and the wine. They're assigned their own chariots, their own attendants, and the suits of elite bronze armor. These men weren't kings, and they weren't generals commanding entire armies. They were listed as individuals. Modern scholars now believe these were the champions of the Mycenaean world, single combat specialists. These were men chosen for their extraordinary skill and courage, designated to fight duels on behalf of their entire army, to settle disputes or turn the tide of battle through personal prowess. This is exactly the role Achilles plays in the Iliad. He is not a king like Agamemnon or a strategist like Odysseus. He is a champion, the army's greatest duelist, whose presence on the battlefield is worth more than 1,000 lesser men. The near-invincibility tablets don't give us the name Achilles, but they prove that the type of warrior Achilles was a state-sponsored, elite, single-combat champion was a real and recognized role in Mycenaean society. So let's put all the pieces together. We have a real war, the Trojan War, which took place at a real location, Troy, at the right time. We have a real warrior culture, the Mycenaeans, whose weapons, armor, and the tactics match Homer's descriptions with uncanny accuracy. We have a name, Achilles, that is plausibly derived from the Mycenaean name for themselves, the Achaeans. And finally, we have written proof from their own administrative records that they employed elite champions who fought in single combat, a role that perfectly describes Achilles. So where does this leave us? Perhaps the Achilles of myth, the invulnerable demigod dipped in the river Styx by his goddess mother, never existed. But the evidence strongly suggests a far more human, and in some ways, a far more terrifying truth. Achilles may have been a real Achaean war champion, a historical figure from the 13th century BC, a man whose skill, speed, and ferocity in battle were so extraordinary, so far beyond those of mortal men, that over the course of 500 years of oral storytelling, he was gradually transformed. His unparalleled talent on the battlefield could only be explained by later generations as a gift from the gods. His story became embellished, his humanity stripped away and replaced with divinity, because it was the only way people could make sense of what he did. He wasn't born a myth. His incredible reality made him become one. Myth, man, soldier. Perhaps Achilles was all three. The man was the seed, the soldier was the trunk, and the myth was the sprawling tree that grew from him. The legend of Achilles remains not because it's a fantasy, but because, like all the greatest legends, it was born from something real. And the search for that reality continues to this day. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, don't forget to like and subscribe for more historical mysteries.